I'm going to talk with maritime attorney Michael Winkleman. Really good guest for this because he has cases that involve these kinds of situations on cruise ships, and he understands the law and how the FBI gets involved. And he is going to explain to us sort of what may be happening behind the scenes here. How does it work on a cruise ship in terms of like police and who investigates, and like if something happens while you're out at sea, who I know the FBI gets on later when you come, back to port, but like who actually initially investigates?
That's a great question, Brian. And I think it's really something that's so unique about cruise ships. There is no independent law enforcement on a cruise ship. The only law enforcement are the cruise ship security guards. And that creates a really unique dynamic where whenever anything bad happens, it's the cruise ship employees that are the first people on site. And in my opinion and in my experience, there's a lot of incentive for the cruise ship employees to try to protect the company. In fact, that's their job. So it's hard for me to really say that there's any independent investigation done initially when something bad happens. It's really not until the FBI gets on or local law enforcement gets on. But that's what's so unique about cruise ship cases. And even in prosecuting them for as many years as I have, I can't just go on a cruise ship when something bad happens on a cruise ship. I have to wait for it to come to port. I have to get access. They're following you around when they're on the cruise ship. So there's a real evidence and information imbalance between the public and even the FBI versus what's actually going on the cruise ship right when something bad happens.
So it's literally security guards. Like let's say there was a murder on a cruise ship, just hypothetically. Like you literally have just security guards showing up initially.
Yep. Absolutely, 100%. There's no question about that. There's been pushes by Congress in the past to try to have like the equivalent of a marshal on a cruise ship, like they have on airplanes sometimes, to create some level of independence. Doesn't exist. If a murder were to happen, it is entirely the cruise line that is investigating it. And I can tell you, in my opinion, in my experience, I've seen situations involving crimes on cruise ships, most notably rapes and sexual assaults, where the victim comes forward and something bad happens and the cruise employees are bending over backwards to get the person to not report it. Why? Because they want to protect the cruise line.
So are they like specially trained security guard? I'm just thinking like are they just basic security guards? Because that seems like a lot of responsibility for someone who's not really like law enforcement.
Well, generally speaking, you're going to have more senior level security officers, more low level security officers. They generally do have a law enforcement background. Some of them are terrific. Some of them are former Mossad type guys. So I'm not going to question the qualifications of the security staff on the ships. What I question is their independence.
And so you talked about some of your cases, and you don't have to get in like names or anything, but what have you seen happen in terms of them trying to, I guess, downplay something bad that happened?
Well, in my experience and in my opinion, what I've seen repeatedly across the cruise industry is when rapes or sexual assaults happen at sea, and I always say that's a hidden epidemic. People don't realize how often that type of crime happens. That there's a pattern that I see that basically when someone comes forward and reports it, they will do everything they can to get them to not report it, saying things like, "Do you really want this on your permanent record? It's going to be a he said, she said," which is really such a horrible thing to do in a person in such a delicate situation like that. But repeatedly, I have clients that come to me and say, "This is what happened. I didn't report it." And then maybe a year goes by when they finally come forward. It's really a sad situation, but I think it underscores the point that's being made, which is that not only do cruise ships have a unique information imbalance because the cruise ship is there is no independent law enforcement, and the law enforcement that's there is not independent and in fact is there to protect the company.
Do you know, are they armed? Like, do they have like police? I mean, do they have like handcuffs and stuff?
Handcuffs, absolutely. Tasers, yes. Asps, yes, but no firearms.
Okay. So if you were sexually assaulted out at sea, or if there was a murder, Um, I mean, there's no real law enforcement until would you have to get to a US port for the FBI to start investigating?
I mean, not necessarily. If there was a crime involving someone that died and they were ported in the Bahamas, certainly the FBI could fly over there and do that. But just practically speaking, the vast majority of cruise ships are home ported in Florida, in various ports in Florida. So generally speaking, the FBI and even local law enforcement would come on the ship as soon as they got back to port.
I was reading a Department of Transportation report earlier, that indicates that crime has gone up on cruise ships. Is that something that you are also seeing?
I think it's a trend that's been going on for years. For me, it's just as the cruise ship industry has grown and grown and grown, which it continues to do, the ships get bigger. You've got something like 30 million US passengers that are on cruise ships every single year. The bigger the industry gets, the bigger the cruise ship gets. It's no surprise that crimes such as rape, sexual assaults, etc., continue to go up.
When you have these cases, I mean, do these cruise lines, are they worried about image? I mean, is that the main thing? They don't want people to feel unsafe. Is that why they try to downplay it, as you say?
In my opinion, absolutely. Number one, I think cruises are generally safe, but I do think there is a small percentage of bad things that happen. And in that situation, in my opinion, the cruise line is going to do whatever they can to try to sweep it under the rug. When we do have cases, there's generally an incentive for the cruise line to try to resolve the case. Why? Because they want to keep it out of the public eye. So it wouldn't surprise me if and when Anna's family, if they ever contacted an attorney, of course, we don't know what happened, Brian, but there would likely be an effort by the cruise line to keep it quiet and make it go away. But that's any company. No company wants bad press. I mean, the way that the press universe works now, it can be rabid and nasty and go viral. So to the extent it can be contained, any company's going to want that to be contained.
Do you think, though, if this was not a homicide, um, I used to be a local reporter in Miami, like Carnival would be getting the word out even sort of like hush hush that it's not. I mean, it seems unusual now that it's been more than a day and the official line is still just that the FBI is investigating. And if it makes me wonder if there's something there beyond just like an overdose or something. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I get where you're going, Brian, and I'm a Miami native also. So I have seen those situations where if it seems like it's disputed, the cruise line will give a little nugget that it was something. Like as an example, like there was the Disney case recently where the child went overboard and the dad jumped him after. I think there was some subtle messages that they were trying to blame the parents for putting the child. Now, is that the truth or not? That remains to be seen. But I do think there's a lot of subtle efforts from the cruise line where applicable that they will try to put blame on the passenger or the victim. Again, no surprise here. Not having seen that, I don't want to guess out of respect for the family because who knows what really happened, but that would certainly make me think that it was something more benign.
The other thing I noticed is the ship, the FBI got on when the ship came in. They had the evidence trucks and everything, but then the ship left. I mean, it continued on, I guess whatever, the new people got on and it moved on. If there was some big investigation or person on the loose or unsolved crime, like would they have just let the ship go like that?
No, I think that's a great point. Assuming the ship turned around like it usually would, that would indicate to me that again it was something that the FBI was able to quickly investigate. And you have to remember again, you've got nothing but independent law enforcement until the FBI and local law enforcement get on the vessel hours later. Definitely a period of hours. In that situation, they're coming on, and it's those same cruise security guards going to say, "This is what our investigation has revealed." Of course, the FBI is going to do its own investigation, but it's certainly going to be largely influenced by what the cruise line presents to them. Cruise line is going to present to them video. They're going to have tracked the movements of Anna. They may have taken witness statements. They definitely would have pulled her drink receipts. Of course, she's 18, so she shouldn't be drinking, but any purchases. So they're going to have put together a pretty complete picture of what they think happened. And then again, the fact that the cruise line was able to turn around so quickly, assuming it was, that would be indicative that it was able for the FBI to quickly investigate it, rather than something where if the vessel was, kept in port for a week, that would make me think that something really unusual happened.
And you mentioned like air marshals kind of comparing it, but it seems more, I mean, you have thousands and thousands of people on these ships. It's like a little city almost, a big town. Um, it does seem kind of surprising that there's not just like one member of law enforcement on each big ship, or I mean, is that something the cruise lines don't want, or do you know why that's the case, or has it just never been like that, so that's just the way it is?
No, there's definitely been efforts and various bills that have been before Congress to try to put the equivalent of a marshal on each cruise ship. Yes, it would be something of an onerous task, but of course they do it under the FAA. The cruise line has fought it adamantly. The last thing that the cruise line ever wants is any more oversight on it. It's such a unique industry because it's really such an under-regulated industry. Of course, the exception to that comment was COVID when it was very heavily regulated. But setting that aside, they don't pay U.S. taxes. They don't follow U.S. labor laws. There's no independent law enforcement on there. I mean, the cruise ships really have a lot of get out of jail free cards.
Is that just because they register in other countries? I notice like you see the Bahamian flag or wherever they register these boats, not United States.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. I mean, they hire the best lawyers in the world to give them the best tax advice and regulatory advice. They fly what are called flags of convenience. With the tiniest of exceptions, there are no U.S. flagged cruise ships. They're all flagged in places like Liberia, Panama, Bahamas, which are basically very tax friendly and basically have like little or no labor laws. So these are all mechanisms designed to keep the cruise industry as underregulated as humanly possible.
Does that make your job hard?
At times, yes, but generally not really. The vast majority of my practice, I've been doing it for 20 years. Our law firm's been doing it for over 50 years. People that get hurt on cruises, what's unique about it is whether you're from Seattle or Texas, if you get hurt, you're required to file in Miami, Florida, according to the ticket contract. So we file in federal court. We've got probably 100 cases going in at any given time. Are they challenging cases? Yes, but it's all we do. I mean, it's literally 99 out of 100 cases at our firm are cruise ship accident cases, whether it's passengers or crew members that get hurt.
Is there anything, and what are the main companies? What, Royal Caribbean and Carnival?
And NCL and
Okay.
Princess. Yeah.
That's right. Okay.
But
Um,
Princess is part of Carnival. But really, the big three would be Carnival, Royal, NCL.
do you think the security officers, I'm just thinking if something, if this is like foul play, do they know to seal off areas that could have evidence and that kind of thing? I mean, do they do basic sort of police work until the FBI can get there?
Yes, again, I don't question the competency of the security teams on the vessels. They are trained and they have to follow strict guidelines in terms of crime preservation. I've seen those. Every single cruise line has detailed ways that they're supposed to do that. And that's, I mean, not really by choice. They have to do that because they have to act reasonably when something bad like this happens. So they're definitely following very strict protocols to preserve the scene, preserve evidence, things of that nature.
Anything else that stands out to you in this case?
The only other nugget that I think is really interesting, and I think your viewers would be interested by, is that assuming Anna died and there was some level of negligence. Remember, I'm not a criminal attorney. I don't do criminal defense, and crimes are prosecuted by state government or federal government. I just do civil cases, which is basically negligence. Did the cruise line do something wrong? Here, if we assume that there was some level of negligence involved, let's say it was over service of alcohol. If that were the case and the case were to be brought against the cruise line, this would likely fall under what's called the Death on the High Seas Act, which is this nasty federal law that really the public generally doesn't know about. It was passed in 1920 as a way to promote maritime commerce. Now, unfortunately, it stays on the books. What it says is that basically when someone dies on the high seas due to the negligence of a cruise line, their damages are severely limited to money that they're providing to dependent beneficiaries. So heaven forbid I died, I have a wife and two small children, I would still have damages under the Death on the High Seas Act. But when older people die, which happens all the time, or when children die like Anna, their damages, because they don't have any dependent beneficiaries, their damages are literally limited to the funeral expenses. So a case like Anna's, assuming there was negligence, could be a $10,000, $15,000 case, which is really a horrible thing. That's not something that me as a lawyer can try to change. That's something that's up to Congress. There have been efforts over the years to try to change DOSHA. There's been unique carve outs that have happened in airline cases. And my number one hope, number one is that the family, gets justice, whatever that means in this case. But number two is really, it's time for DOSHA to change. It's time for the Death on the High Seas Act to change. It's time for Congress to stop giving cruise ships another get out of jail free card. There's absolutely zero reason for it to be still on the books. Yet it is. Really, the only reason that it's still in the books is because the cruise lines pay so much money to lobbyists to keep it from being changed. But my hope is that anytime there's a high-profile case like this, it has the potential to get rid of the Death on the High Seas Act.
Is there a way to get around that as a lawyer?
Well, theoretically, if there was some negligence that didn't happen in the high seas, so in my cases where I'm dealing with that, I always want to pinpoint literally via GPS exactly where it happened to try to show that it didn't happen on the high seas. But the law is very unfavorable. And if there was really, it's clear that it happened on the High Seas Act, you're going to be stuck under the Death on the High Seas Act. It's awful. It's nasty. It needs to change.
So what's the difference between high seas? Is there another location in the ocean it could be where it wouldn't fall into that?
Well, as an example, let's say someone slipped and fell on a wet floor while the vessel was still in port and died. Then it wouldn't be the death on the high seas act because it was in port.
Yep.
Versus if it's clearly on the high seas, then it's a death on the high seas act case.
Um, it sounds like I mean, I hate to say this, but these cruise lines are kind of shady in a way. Like I think you go on the cruise and you just think it's like going to Disney or it's like going to, just on vacation anywhere. And it sounds like you give up some rights that maybe unless you read the fine print, you don't realize.
Well, okay. First and foremost, I think cruises are great. I think cruises are safe. I really think that. I think that all the cruise lines want to keep their passengers safe. Having said that, just the nature of the cruise industry where they're so underregulated, they don't pay US taxes, they don't follow US labor laws. They get the benefit of things like the Death on the High Seas Act. There's no independent law enforcement. These are all things that I think give them an advantage that's really unfair and should change. Are they shady? I don't really think so. I think they're driven by a corporate interest, which is to make money. And of course, that's just the American way. So cruises are safe. More importantly, Brian, I think my number one advice is don't leave your common sense at the port. You just sort of alluded to this. People go on a cruise ship, they think they're going to Disney World. They think they're on some magic insulated protected bubble. That is not the case. You are on a floating city. You should act like you're in Manhattan. You should act like you're in New York City. You wouldn't let your kids walk around in the middle of New York City any time of day. You shouldn't do that on cruise ships. You got to bring your common sense with you. You've got to do what it takes to keep yourself safe and your family safe.
Yeah, it does. I even have some friends. It does seem like people let their guard down. Like if you have like a kid, that you would never let, like you said, walk around a big city alone. Suddenly it's like, oh yeah, they get to do their own thing for the week.
Well, and remember too, I said invariably stories like this involve the overservice and overconsumption of alcohol. People don't have to drive anywhere on cruise ships. So I know so many people that go on cruises because they don't have to drive. They're going to drink their faces off, and that just leads to trouble.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I appreciate your time, Michael.
Ryan, anytime, anything that happens on the high seas or cruise ship related, call me.